Hello, Mr. Loverro.
I sense a little
All right.
sarcasm in best open job.
Well, that's what Ted described it as.
Yeah, it's not Tom's words. These are Ted's words.
Yeah, I know, but they've managed to make a mess of it, and they're probably going to wind up, at least for now, with the only guy left in the room, Tommy Shepard.
Well, there's no way that they're going to just bring in a guy 2 days away from the NBA draft, which is Thursday, and upset the apple cart of the work that's already been done. You can't bring in Ujiri at this point. You can, but you can't have them run the draft. I mean, it's too late at this point.
Yeah, I mean, Tommy Shepard's running the draft, and I wouldn't be surprised if he winds up with the interim general manager title at some point because, I mean, they've really messed this up, particularly Ujiri, the Toronto guy who, like, within seconds after winning the title, Adrian Wojnarowski drops this report that the Wizards are poised to make him a $10 million a year offer, which included part ownership of the team. The next day, they got slapped back with the potential tampering charges, and they had to back off that. And that may be dead in the water now.
Well, let's rewind this for a second, Tom. They hired a consulting firm, didn't they?
Yes, they did. That's the remarkable part, that they had help doing this. And the guy has a good reputation. I think his name is Bob Forty. He's a former head of a soccer club in England. This is what he does for a living now. And actually, Sean McVay hired him to evaluate the Rams after McVay got hired. But I wouldn't put, consulted the Wizards on my resume if I was him.
What do you think this team should do, though? Let's just go kind of fast forward. So they have the draft. It'll be Tommy Shepard, and I'm sure the scouts and Shepard, they've done their due diligence. They can make a draft pick, right? That'll be fine. Be best player available, whatever they do, because they don't have many guys under contract. And let's say, let's say Ujiri says no to the Wizards, which is what I would expect. I mean, he's got a championship team there. Maybe it depends on whether Kawhi Leonard's going to come back or not. But I just don't see the appeal of leaving Toronto, a team which is a contender in the playoffs year after year, for a team that has John Wall under contract and the whole mess that the Wizards have. What do they do? Because we were talking about earlier in the show, like, should you need to have a place to make that type of decision?
Yeah, what I don't understand is Ted has been at least the minority owner of that team for more than 20 years, and he's been the majority owner for 9 years. You would think by now he would know the NBA and have identified the hot shots in front offices around the league to target for this kind of job, the up-and-comers. I mean, you're in the industry. People talk when in the industry.
Well, they did target Connolly.
Yes. Yeah, they did, but there was a half-hearted attempt. They reportedly wouldn't give him a fifth year. They only offered him 4 years, and he was never going to really take the job because apparently he's very close to Tommy Shepard. Tommy Shepard was his mentor, and he'd be very reluctant to take a job that Tommy Shepard was up for as well, unless they made him, like an Ujiri offer, like he couldn't refuse. I mean, this is such an important hire for Ted because this is the signal to the fans that there's going to be a different era. It's the hire that Ted should have made the minute he took over the team in 2010. It was the first thing that Ted Leonsis should have done to have shown everybody it's not going to be business as usual, and it took him 9 years to do it. So, I mean, I'm kind of disappointed in that he hasn't been able to find somebody, and I don't know who that is. I don't own an NBA team in one of the front offices who they think is the next great GM.
Tom, you are the newly minted GM of the Wizards in a fantasy world. All right, so your first big decision is, do you move Bradley Beal, basically one of your cornerstones of the franchise, or do you build along with him and Wall, even though you know it's going to be tough because Wall has the Supermax deal that starts kicking in next year, and Bradley Beal is due a raise a few years down the line. Do you part with Beal or do you keep him here and try to build around him?
You know, Wall is such an albatross because I'm not sure he's ever going to. Well, I don't think he'll ever be the same, and I don't know for sure if he'll ever play again. Really, at this point. Look, if I'm a new GM, I want my guys, the guys that I drafted. I'm trading Beal. You know, however good Bradley Beal may be, if I'm a new GM, my fortunes are gonna rise or fall with my decisions on the guys that I bring in, not the guys I inherit. So if I'm the new GM, I'm trading Bradley Beal.
Yeah, getting back to Ujiri for a minute, like even if he were offered that ridiculous financial package, $10 million plus a piece of Monumental Sports, like why would you want to deal with this franchise? Why would you want to? Maybe if you're looking for like a gigantic challenge because you just won the title in Toronto, you would consider it. But he's got other options, including staying in Toronto or going to a more established franchise down the road.
Yeah, that's the other thing. You know, I mean, Washington should be a destination spot in the NBA. It's a great city. It's certainly a great city for young African-American players. But they've been unable to attract anyone here. And, again, I put that on Ted in a way because he's supposed to be the closer. I mean, that's what the owner – that's one of the roles of the owner, to close the big deals, to go in at the end and convince the guy that, you know, this is where you want to be. They haven't been able to do it with players. They weren't able to do it with Al Horford, which would have been a game changer in the division because he wound up going to Boston. And you know, this is on Ted. He has to convince somebody that you know, if you take this job and turn this around, you're going to be the king of the NBA in the nation's capital. It should be based on where the location is, an attractive job. But the franchise is such a mess. It's not one of the most important open jobs in sports.
We're joined by Thom Loverro talking about the Wizards draft, of course, on Thursday. They still don't have a GM. The thing about it is the Capitals with Ted hired somebody who was in-house. It worked out. They won a Stanley Cup. And Tommy Shepard, if you look at his resume, is certainly capable. Yes, he's been working under Ernie Grunfeld, but so McClellan worked under, you know, was a guy who was also working under somebody too. So, I mean, maybe they end up with the right guy after all if it ends up being Tommy Shepard.
Well, of course. I mean, I don't know if Tommy Shepard, you know, can do the job or not. I have no reason to think he can't. He's very highly regarded within the basketball industry, and that may happen. But I'm sure Caps fans are saying to themselves, you know, you're willing to spend $10 million and give a piece of the ownership to a guy to run your basketball team. Where are all these deep pockets when you had to pay your Stanley Cup winning championship coach? Where were those deep pockets then?
Well, it's certainly going to feel that way, but that cat's out of the bag. It's done.
I know. I'm just pointing out that you know, for Ted, the perception right now is really bad. He's going to wind up if they hold a press conference, most of the questions are going to be about who they didn't hire, not who they hired.
Thom, I don't even think it matters, at least in the short term, who the GM is. When you have 70% of your cap figure for 2019 and 2020 tied up in John Wall, Bradley Beal, and Jan Mahinmi, I'm sorry. You're just not going to be able to compete with especially the super teams that are being built in the NBA at this point. I mean, 33% of your salary cap is sitting on the sideline. You'll be lucky to have John Wall play for you at all during any meaningful games in the next calendar year.
Yeah, it's anybody at this point to come in here and take this job. I agree with you, absolutely. It's very unattractive at this point, no matter what Ted wants to say. So this is why you probably can't get the big name splash. You probably got to get lucky and identify the low profile assistant GM somewhere in the NBA who people talk about as the next big star. Ted should have had a list in his back pocket of potential GM candidates that he carried around with him wherever he went for the last 9 years, and he should know the league better.
Well, they did interview guys like Danny Ferry. Maybe they just didn't love those guys, or
Look, if you were putting together a list, wouldn't there? I mean, somebody say, who do you want to interview? I put Danny Ferry on the list because I know who Danny Ferry is.